Let me introduce Dr. Allan Cohen. You're a doctor now. Yeah, for this, you're a doctor.
Too many doctors in the house.
Too many doctors in the house. You all know who he is, so I'm not going to go into that. But he is speaking, he is stepping out in faith and speaking about a topic which, to my knowledge, has never been spoken about in a forum like this. Meher Baba and Sufism and the inside story. Okay. After his presentation, which we'd like you to let him do straight away, there will be we'll have more food coming out, and there'll be a question and answer period. This is a question and answer period. You ask a question and you get a frank and complete answer from Allan. It is not, however, a disquisition. It's not a debate. If anyone wants to set up a panel to do that at a later time, all they have to do is book it at the Circle Center. But it is a place where information, very important information, can be exchanged in a highly efficient manner. And as I said, I wish we had 5 hours for this, but we don't. Okay, and with that, the show is going to have to go on. Robin would like to take the Q&A. However, if anybody doesn't want her to turn the camera on them, that is fine, let her know. And if afterwards you got the videotaped and you decided against having it, please let Robin know and she will edit you out quicker than sooner. Okay? And that way you will not become part of the archive of history where you said something that you thought was dumb. And you don't want people for 700 years to say, boy, did you see how dumb that one was? That's one of the things I live in terror of. In my house, you could be anything, but you couldn't be dumb. Okay, all right. Have I said everything I needed to say? Then it is time for the expert to talk.
I first want to say that I have won the contest for dumb. I have asked the dumbest question of God himself I think I've ever heard. It was when I was younger. I wrote to Adi Irani. We had been in a lot of touch about Meher Baba and the drug work. And I had a shot at asking Baba questions. Mostly it was about LSD, but I threw one in. There was a kind of a movement of cryogenics, where people would, in terminal illness, freeze themselves, so that in a couple hundred years, when scientists could revive the person and cure the disease, they'd be fine. And I wondered what happened to the soul after that. At that time, I thought it was a good question. But I got a response back from Adi with very nice comments from Bob about the drug work. He said, but would you please in the future hold your questions to the topics of drugs and Meher Baba's work. Don't ask questions like what happens with cryogenic people. But then he said, if you must know, the person freezes to death. Well, there you are. Anyway. So, don't worry about it. Dennis, you can't beat that. Anyway, it's wonderful to be here. Many of you were here last night. Anybody not here last night? Okay, good, fine. Anyway, this is a wonderful gathering, a wonderful place. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I told you last night we had folks from everywhere migrating here. Now today, I note, which I wouldn't have, that two people are here. When I first heard of Meher Baba in Woodstock, Tom Riley, and it turns out that Chris Ott was 4 years old at the time and moving about the floor. He was already writing things down. Also, we have about 50% of the Baba group from Kelowna, British Columbia here today for the first time. Yeah. And, of course, greetings to everybody who's watching this on videotape. By the time you see the videotape, I will have matured. But, you know, being 80 now, it doesn't really matter. It's all downhill. Now, you might wonder why I'm here and why I'm talking about this. This man is responsible. This man sends me a letter. And he talks about an event they had here, I think early last year, from a very fine woman from Berkeley, who was talking about different subjects, some of which were relevant to Sufism Reoriented. And Dennis said, you know, for all of the connections and contacts that our local people have had with Sufism Reoriented, they perhaps don't know all that much about it, really. And could you come over and maybe fill us in? Now, it is unusual because we usually don't do this. But I had a couple of reasons for it. Number one, it's nice to know your new neighbors. There's going to be a lot of activity around Myrtle Beach, I think, in the future, which the Sufis are very, very pleased about. And, you know, it's good to satisfy curiosity. And now, here's the one thing. And I've got to make disclaimers all over this talk. I'm not, this is not an official representative of Sufism Reoriented. I'm not necessarily authorized to say anything in particular. I'm only going to give my personal experiences. I haven't prepared the talk as an intellectual history of critical issues, but just to kind of acquaint folks with what Sufism Reoriented is all about and what I've experienced with now 50-some years and 3 different murshids and murshidas, simultaneously with being connected with the Baba world in ways that don't really involve Sufism particularly. And I want to talk about that integration, but give you a taste of what's going on, what the work is. All right? So take my disclaimer. I'm not responsible for anything I'm saying. How's that? Oh, thank God. All right, now I would like to, let me tell you, Sufism Reoriented is incorporated, as you know, and we'll have some pretty good history in a few minutes, was chartered by Meher Baba, and who wanted it set up temporarily as a corporation. It is a 501c nonprofit chartered in California. And under the laws of California, you are most free if you charter as a church, as a religious institution. It is, as Baba indicated and wished, a fully democratic organization in that it is a membership corporation, which means the members vote on and elect a board of directors, like you do, as opposed to what often nonprofits have, which is a revolving board of directors or self-elected board of directors. I personally am not on the board. I'm not an officer. I'm not an official. I'm nothing in terms of corporate authority. So the organization operates very much like the Circle does as a nonprofit. The spiritual directors, or the murshids or murshidas, they're not on the board either, and they're not officers. So from a democratic point of view, they don't have votes. It's relatively independent in that regard. Not that one would expect they would lose their jobs. But, okay. Merchant Deuce once asked, what happens if they fire me? He said, you just move your seat. So, okay, what goes on? Let me talk about California first. I'm going to do the present first, and then we go to the past. I'm going to highlight some projects that Sufism is involved with, first in California. One thing is the order has an orientation towards the arts, music, poetry, dance, drama, so that they're always in process some kind of video dramatic production. Right now they're working on musical dramas of Meher Baba's life in America. The musical part of Sufism is represented very much by about a 50-person chorus in California, very good chorus, that now performs at other churches and at other nonprofit organizations, including doing a Christmas Mass at one of the Catholic churches in town. The Sufism Reoriented is now members of the Contra Costa Interfaith Council, okay, which often we host meetings of some 200 different religious organizations in the county that get together and support each other. For example, there was a kind of demonstration against Muslims in the community, and the Interfaith Council got together and marched in support of their right to pray and believe in what they're doing, and the drive towards equality. There's a big project called the White Pony Express. White Pony Express, what happened is Merchant O'Connor felt that there was a great deal of poverty in our county, and particularly hunger, especially among the immigrant and the minorities, and wanted to see what we could do to equalize that, given the fact that a lot of our county is very, very wealthy, and the possibilities of great food and nutritious food was out there, but it never got to these people. So the White Pony Express started to take food from the grocery stores that they no longer could shelve, but were perfectly nutritious, and transport that food to kitchens run by nonprofits who were feeding the homeless and feeding those who were hungry. They usually would only get stuff from the food bank, which could never really handle fresh food or fresh proteins, certainly not great baked goods, certainly not vegetables, fresh vegetables. So the system is that the food kitchens call up the White Pony Express, tell them what they need for the next day, and a troop of trucks and volunteers go out, grab the stuff from Whole Foods, from orchards, from bakeries, and then bring them to the kitchens. That work has expanded greatly, beyond even the Sufi volunteers. So now they are able to move 2 tons of good food every day to needy people in the county, with a fleet of trucks and great amount of community participation now. That project has really taken off, and it's combined with an associated project they call the Mobile Boutique. You're going to see an example of it in a few minutes. And that is that there were last year about 144,000 pieces of clothing, toys, and books were able to be distributed to children and needy families in in the area. The interesting part of that is that we had fashion designers who would take the particular needs of a person and pick out outfits for them, particularly dressing to be able to interview for work. Those programs have been so popular that the state and county have recognized it. And recently, Mershida Connor got the AARP award in California for individual most honored for community service in the state. So that was a big program. Now, in California, there's a new Sufi center. Given the context of the neighborhood, which was very opposed to any kind of development, it really tried to have it seem as churchy as possible for them. So the new center is called a sanctuary, and I love it. The house that Mershda stays in is called the parsonage. So sweet. They were on our case. Some of you have been to that building. In fact, we have video today. You may see Buzz in the background, actually. And it's very ample, and it was able to integrate all of the volunteer work, all the artistic work, all the choral work, and the technical electronics, the digital initialization that was going on. It's quite an impressive building, mostly underground. It houses, I think, the largest permanent image of Meher Baba in the world. Big and very, very tall, 40-foot tall sculpture of the new being. It has a big kitchen. And part of that kitchen is used to prepare foods for special projects, but it's also available for members and their guests. And they put out about 210,000 meals a year. It's a very big scale. Now, also, there is you remember the big fire that happened in California? Camp Fire. This was the one that destroyed that city of paradise. White County has a special project where we truck every week lots of food and clothing up to paradise. And I think they've made about 50 trips or so. It's a 6-hour round trip. And that's been very helpful to these people. We also make special deliveries to the homeless who really can't get out to some of the kitchens, etc. Another program we call Following Francis, which takes the notion of Francis of Assisi, who's very popular across a lot of religious systems. And first with parochial schools, then with public schools, offered children in the minority underserved areas an opportunity to have a day of delight, a fair with a drama about St. Francis, with games, with food, a very freeing kind of joyful day. And so far there's been about 16,000 kids we've been able to offer this kind of delightful experience. Along with the Francis connection, in California they made a link with the Catholic Diocese of San Francisco to help with a replica of the Porciuncula of St. Francis of Assisi, an exact replica, which the Pope actually named, not this Pope, the 6th sacred place for Catholicism in the United States. That's been very interesting. Also going on, major work in retranslating Upasani Maharaja's work. You might know that Baba wanted and ordered translations of his work into 3 languages. The one that that was in English is hardly readable. If you can imagine how the Indians would do it. And so they're being totally retranslated and re-researched completely with the help of Dr. Gadakar's son, who's major Bob lover in the Pune area, and others. And that should come out pretty soon. That's going on in California. Let's see. Also, for our Christian neighbors, there is a living creche that they do every Christmas with animals. I went out there and was not prepared to see a camel. But delighted to. And I think that may actually happen here this year.
December 21st at 5:30 at 55th Avenue North in Myrtle Beach,
On the
at Garden
beach.
at the Sea. There will be a living creche, so if you have never seen a camel or want to get close to one, it will be there. That's this December 21st at 5:30. There'll be something on.
So for the peanut gallery here, there's an announcement of an actual event, which I didn't know that much about. Thank you, Dennis. The other kinds of things that go on is a major distribution of Meher Baba films, particularly to India. I think there's some 50 Meher Baba centers in India that Sufism has distributed. Often films, depending on their modalities, films, discs, DVDs, electronics, and in some cases the ability to reproduce them. Anyone that asks for that kind of help will get it. Another Indian connection is assisting the Meher Baba Universal Spiritual Center in Byramangala near Bangalore, which Baba had said would ultimately become one of the spiritual capitals of the world. They are moving into developing a central structure and buildings that were kind of designed by Baba, and I think have a little bit to do with, or were suggested as a design that might be influencing the Meher Spiritual Center someday. That's been going on for a while. There's been celebrations there that we participated in. Up in Washington, what are we doing in Washington? There are two centers. One is in Walnut Creek, California, probably around 375 members. And then we have one in Washington, D.C., 4 miles directly north of the White House. We have to absorb those vibes. And there are about around 100 members there. In DC, we have an interesting experiment going on for about 30 years. And that's an urban ashram. By that, we don't really call it an urban ashram. I call it an urban ashram. A situation in which folks live, a lot of folks, maybe 50 or 60 people, live in a combine of maybe 4 or 5 houses, and collectively take care of the center and eat together and interact together and have class together. It's very interesting. I know of no other such ashram that has lasted for this long. They all blow up if you try to have collective living. It always, but this one doesn't. Now, Baba liked these kinds of things obviously in India, from a spiritual training point of view, to rub your egos with like 30 or 40 other people. Somebody's going to irritate you. Guaranteed. So it really helps develop the kind of friction that's needed to overcome a little bit of the egoistic instincts. The other thing is it's totally equalized. That is, there's no pecking order. You will find, for example, we'll have one person who might actually work in the same company as another. They have a boss. But at night, that boss becomes the dishwasher, and they're the captain of the cooking team. So let's see, we put together about 18,000 meals a year there, breakfast and dinner. And it's really quite good. The other thing we do is we do a big Halloween show for kids in the neighborhood. We had about 600 people come this year. We have games. It's a non-scary Halloween. It's a spiritual Halloween, can you believe? Yes. And the fairies and the elves dismiss the ghosts by saying, light, light, go away. And they sprinkle fairy dust. They have other kinds of games. We really like that. There's also a couple of cleanup projects. There's there's a 365-day-a-year trash pickup in what is known as Columbia Heights, which is a needy neighborhood. And also we're working with the National Park Service to beautify a very, very nice park that's in the middle of that area that's really not been used very well. Again, the notion here is less just the results of that work, but a prototype of service that at least that not only helps our folks get a feel for what that kind of service is like, but also might stimulate others. We've finally got some other community people saying, you people are out here every day. Can we join you? Sure, go ahead. All right, now in Myrtle Beach, it's logical, of course, that Sufism would be interested in Myrtle Beach, not only because of the existence of the Mayor's Spiritual Center, Baba's home in the West, but because while Mayor Baba was recovering from his accident in 1952 at Yupon Dunes, a house on North Ocean Boulevard, he worked pretty much every day on the charter for Sufism. You'll hear a little bit about that later. And it turns out that it was possible ultimately for Sufism to acquire that property. And we've been working to kind of restore it. I remember just getting there, going into Baba's room, going into the closet and seeing mold. This was not good. This was not good. I mean, Baba's presence was there, but so was the mold. I think we could do better than that. So that's going on. There are, as you know, Mershta Connor has found this to be a wonderful atmosphere in Myrtle Beach to do workshops, and many Sufis come to visit for that. With the collaboration of folks who volunteer at the center and who volunteer at the circle, we had apparently a little service project in Black Bikers Week, which was really fun. I think Myrtle Beach doesn't have a great history in terms of racial equality or non-discrimination, and it seemed good to at least take a shot at that. The other major project here is the support of a public housing complex of families and children, which we're going to see in a minute, who are underserved and whose children they're mostly single parents and need better food, they need good clothing, they really need inspiration for their education. And so there's been a program to offer both weekly experiences for them over the year, and with the help of the Circle folks, we ran a mobile boutique here, which you're going to see in a minute. That's an ongoing work, and again thought to be very important at least, if not symbolically and internally and metaphorically and experientially, as something that's really nice to do. So, in fact, let's take a peek at that right now. I want you to see a little peek of what you folks have helped do. This is scenes from the mobile boutique in Myrtle Beach, I think in July. Well done, Myrtle Beach. Yes. Yes. So, all right. Let's get into some meat now and talk a little bit about the history of Meher Baba and Sufism. And I happen to have a very nice summary of that from, thankfully, not me, but an authority. Mershta Carol Connor gave this. I took a clip from her inauguration speech from the inauguration of the new center. She starts out by talking about the symbol that Meher Baba had selected for Sufism Reoriented. By the way, for no door prize, who can guess who named Sufism Reoriented? Who made up that name? Huh? No.
Mera.
Not Mera, no.
Madi.
Adi K. Irani. Baba told him, come up with a name. And he said he thought about it, and he came up with the name. Baba said, that's good. That's a good name. Okay. So, what? What's the no door prize? Nothingness. And everything. All right, so let's play this, because this is going to be a foundation of some of the other things we'll be talking about today. Okay.
And to release the fragrance
consider with me for a moment the design that Meher Baba chose to symbolize Sufism Reoriented. The winged golden heart, the emblem affixed to the central gate that greeted us all this afternoon as we entered our campus and gardens. This beautiful symbol was prepared jointly by Meher Baba and Murshid Adus. When he released his new reoriented Sufism from all its ties of the past, Baba universalized this traditional emblem by placing in the center of the golden heart in flight the number 1, alluding to the underlying unity of all life in God. The unprecedented central message of this avataric advent. Murshid Adus requested that the 2 wings of freedom emerge from the top of the heart, one on each side, rather than extending from the bottom portion, to more vividly convey the buoyancy of spiritual freedom, the goal of eternal Sufism. So conceived, this winged heart became the symbol for Meher Baba's avataric reorientation of ancient Sufism, refreshed and renewed for a new spiritual age. Baba wrote to Murshid Adus, "Do you not realize that the very assertion that I'm connected with all isms, and yet detached and above all isms, lays bare the truth that Sufism reoriented, emanating from me, to be conceived and practiced, will forge out into one of the few pure channels leading to one God. As a result, all who will follow any one of the isms reoriented by me will come eventually to love and realize me, rather than the isms." The Sufi winged heart symbolizes the processes associated with prayer, reverence, and contemplation of the beloved that we've been discussing, processes of transformation that lie at the very heart of Meher Baba's Sufism Reoriented. Here in Sufism's new home, transformation or transfiguration is represented by the sculpture of the new being in the well of the staircase, and by the murals of the divine theme in the concourse, designed to depict the evolution and involution of the drop soul on its journey in 10 stages from God and back to God in ultimate final realization. These processes of transformation associated with the eternal Sufi path of return were dear to Meher Baba. And so, when he first met with Murshid Adus in 1948, he was eager to push forward his agenda to bring the central nature of eternal Sufism under his wing, while making its practice suitable for a new spiritual age. He signaled the importance of this project by interrupting his seclusion and suspending his work with musts for 5 days to meet with Murshida at his home in Merazad. He informed her that the ending of a vast cycle of cycles is taking place, a unique turning point in the entire history of creation, when the fundamental direction of life currents, which have flowed outward toward crystallized material form for trillions of years, now reverses to begin to draw creation back to its source. The work of Baba's advent was to lay the foundations for this universal change of direction, which would touch all the realms and all the graded planes and all the forms, indeed, creation as a whole. As Meher Baba said, there will be a gradual transition from rational processes of thought to intuitive processes of knowing, from the reasoned understanding of the head to the silent, intuitive knowing of the heart. This is, of course, the great transition that is the foundation for the long-awaited new life and new humanity. This change of direction is what Baba implied in his initial meeting with Murshid Adus when he referred to the end of the vast cycle of cycles. In that same meeting, Baba told Murshida that they'd been together many, many times, and that he had drawn her to him again in this lifetime to build up Sufism in the West, because that was her destiny in this incarnation. He intimated that he had a plan for renewing eternal Sufism under his aegis. He said that he wanted Sufism to spread in the coming age, and that he himself would stand behind her work, seeing to it that she didn't make mistakes with her students. He appointed her to teach his principles while encouraging her to carry forward her traditional title of Murshida, or guide. All that was expected of her was to, this is a quote, uphold the highest traditions of spirituality, that is, Sufism, pure and simple, and to make the Sufi order as reoriented by him, this is a quote, safe and sane and stable, to last 700 years until he came again. In 1952, on his first visit to Myrtle Beach, the time seemed ripe to implement this plan for renewal, and he moved forward quickly to draw up the formal charter for his new Sufism. Throughout the year, he focused on it intensively, preserving the central core of eternal Sufism of pure love for God. He radically redefined and refocused its practice to serve his goals for the unfolding new spiritual age. To Murshida, he underlined the unprecedented nature of the avatar's participation, saying, "For the first time, I am taking personal interest in Sufism. I'm very serious about the reoriented Sufism." The proposed new charter was to be, this is a quote, a model for the world. Emphasizing this point in a later meeting, he admonished her that she must not be 1% vague about the charter, as it was, as he said, of universal importance. For several weeks, Baba had his secretary read the charter to him for a half hour every day. In this way, he worked to empower his Sufi charter for the future, just as his participation had energized his special prayers. Baba's plan for a revitalized Sufism, suitable both in the East and the West, should be considered in the context of the arc of his broader avataric work, culminating in his design for a new life and a new humanity.
Okay, so that's a little introduction to the history. I think perhaps you might be interested now in the question of the spiritual training aspect of Sufism. I mean, mastery and servitude is big, but there's also an internal developmental function. Murshid Adus once wrote, he said this, Sufism Reoriented provides a system of inner training for those who wish to go beyond the form side of religion and arrive at the real heart of spiritual life. We have to not only intellectually know, but realize that one current running through everything and every creature in existence. We have to learn how to achieve harmony with each other, with God, and within ourselves. We have to cease compartmentalizing our lives and to translate our spiritual knowledge into everyday life. Meher Baba has commanded that I establish a strong Sufi school in the Americas, and so, by his grace, this I have been trying to do. Sufis regard the world as their school, wherein they have to learn how to live a divine life. Now, so what goes on in Sufism Reoriented? Well, pretty much it follows exactly the charter that Meher Baba wrote. All the way from the symbol, the heart and wings, the song that's sung before every formal class, the words of which are, God alone is real and the goal of life is to be united with him through love, to the repetition of one name of God, guess which one people pick, 30 minutes a day, and to meditate on Baba either mentally on his image, stories, etc. for 15 minutes a day. There are, both in California and in DC, usually weekly classes with breaks for holidays. The classes are extremely varied, and if you look at Baba's charter, you can see how varied they are. There's the study of perfect masters, study of spiritual literature. There is particular emphasis on themes that Meher Baba brought up. They're very ambitious classes. For example, Murshid Khan is now working on, I think, the 62nd talk on Meher Baba's work in America. Murshid Mackay had a dynamite series on Meher Baba's work in Bangalore in World War II. Classes are usually an hour and a half long. They can sometimes be musical, sometimes they're historical about, for example, some of the video from the celebration of the Great Darshan that just occurred in Mehrabad. So they're varied, they're preceded by about 5 minutes, 10 minutes of silence. Then what used to be called the zikr or the song is sung in 3 parts if there's enough people, and then there's the class. Depending on where you are in DC or in Washington, there are opportunities for meditation with Baba's films at least 3 times a week. Sometimes, I think in Washington now it's available every night. And that's really about it in terms of the curriculum. Membership is Baba's business. There really is not a formal vetting of qualification, nor is there any demand that people stay members. It's totally voluntary. If people don't like it, they leave. If they're interested, they do have to absolutely accept Meher Baba as the avatar. That's one of the things that there is no question about. And otherwise, the members are really basically attracted to the teacher or the spiritual guide. That differs. Anytime there is a change this has been going all the way back to Murshid Martin, who introduced the Nayat Khan's brand of Sufism in America and who ultimately came here and was with Norina Machiavelli and Elizabeth Patterson and became sure that Meher Baba was the Qutub and gave her Sufi order over to him. When she did that, she lost most of her students. They said, what? What? The Europeans and the Indians. But Murshid Martin, she's a woman. Worse, she's American. And if that's not enough, she's Jewish. That'll do it. That really cut down the group. One man in Australia went along. His name is Baron von Furstenberg. And there was a Sufi tradition then in Australia, which Francis Brabazon was eventually named the Murshid of. I was herding cats in Australia, and he just got out of there as soon as reasonably could get back to India. So, with every change, there are people who leave who don't feel the connection with the next Murshid or Murshida. And there are people who, for the first time, who sometimes who get introduced to Baba for the same time, become interested and become connected. It's my best personal understanding that this Sufi group is going to remain small, probably no more than 500 people. It's my guess that's what I understand, primarily because there wouldn't be too many people to connect individually with the teacher. Now, all the Murshids have had, I'd say, probably a couple hundred friends out there too, in different geographical areas. Baba wanted one center in California and San Francisco Bay Area and one on the East Coast. It turned out to be Washington. And it's really best if people locate in one of those two places. But there are friends and members who have been brought by their jobs or families to other places as well. Murshid Mackay used to get about 400 letters a day, so he had a lot of friends. There are people interested. But I don't think it's going to be very, very large. And that's probably how it should be. So the primary other aspect of, if you will, the day has to do with potential services in terms of volunteer work. Most of the people in DC, for example, now we're getting older though, we're all working in the world. So the emphasis was, of course, to translate spiritual understanding into daily life. Really not complicated. So in a certain sense, Sufism Reoriented is simply a slightly more intense Meher Baba group, basically, when you really look at it. It's really not much different. There's no ideological difference. There certainly is a total dedication to Baba, and there's total belief that it has to work for 700 years. When Murshid Khan told the architects, "Oh, build me a building, it's got to last 700 years." They said, "What?" No one ever asked that. What are you talking about? That's the deal. And it is designed to do that. It is also designed to make short work of the big earthquake. It's mostly underground and is designed to last. So this is just kind of the beginning. Now when in the old days, when I was young, a young Baba lover, I said to myself, they can't screw up this avatar's message. They can't. That they, like Christian church and he wrote all of his stuff in English. There's no translation problem here. He's universal. He doesn't exclude anybody. He lays out the entire creation of the universe. He gives all the secret mystical teachings. There's nothing to bump against here. Well, I'm not sure now. I'll read later something Baba said about that. But that appealed to me personally. I thought, boy, it would be nice if somebody held on to Meher Baba for 700 years, for sure. And later in our, as a prelude to our Q&A, I'm going to give you some stuff that you probably haven't heard, but which is interesting about how that might be continued. You know, I got a free pass. That's why I'm kind of secure about all this. At the same time, we were communicating with Baba about the drug work. The Meher Baba activity in the San Francisco Bay Area was almost all happening at Sufism Reoriented. There were no other groups. And I just went to class not knowing that it wasn't just Meher Baba group. I loved the classes. Mercy Dukes was great. And I had no idea that it was a Sufi class. I was only informed later that, you know, do you want to become a member of Sufism? What is that? What does that mean? It means you can keep going to the classes. Fine. But I wanted to check it out with Baba. So I wrote him. So I got a free pass to come in. I'm not feeling bad about it at all. It's a nice feeling to be part of something that you pretty much know is going to be authentic and is going to be totally devoted towards Meher Baba. Later on, we'll discuss some of the moderately controversial aspects of this, but for now, my experience was there was never any problem of integrating Sufism and Meher Baba work. It was the same. It was Murshid Adus that wrote to Baba that started the drug work. I was at the center living here for 3 months when Baba replied to her and instructed I and Rick Chapman and Robert Dreyfus to go tell the world to stop using drugs, which was a shock, needless to say. And everybody really was working together very, very nicely at that time. You know, we had very long and intimate communications with Erich and Mani and Adi. And Baba he would break his seclusion. He really wanted that drug work to happen. And Murshid Adus helped publish the God in the Pill pamphlet, and then also encouraged some of the Baba folks over in Berkeley to start Meher Baba League, something that was broader and the general public could come to and learn about Baba. So that began to grow. But I never felt any difference. I never felt any conflict. And I don't today. It's all Baba, and the principles of Baba, and the principles of oneness, and the principles of infinite consciousness and divine love are there. And they're there in India, they're there at Meher Center, they're here in the circle, they're everywhere. Anyway, I'm going to now let you see give you a little bump before you snack, and then we'll get to some other stuff in the Q&A.
Is there a video?
Huh? Go for it.
Well, I'll have to turn it on.
Now this is a field trip that was arranged for the Myrtle Beach kids to come up to Washington for a week to help know that it was their country as well. And many had not been to Washington. And they were housed at the center residences. They had guides, families came, some of you helped out, yes. All right, ready, Dennis?
Leading the way to love grows like a rose in the garden. Water it and tend to it every day. Our hearts are like buds on the same stem, growing together and learning the way to love. Love, 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 love. Leading the way to love.
Truths of the mind and treasures of the heart. Lifetimes of learning, held in loving form. It stops once you need to colors now refined as gems of the heart to the jewels of the mind to the love grows like a rose. Yeah, love grows like a rose. Yeah, water it, tend to it every day, growing together and learning the way to the love. Yeah,
Love grows like a rose in the garden. Water it and tend to it every day. Our hearts are like buds on the same stem, growing together and learning the way to love. Love, 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 love. Learning the way to love.
I'm so glad
Love, 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 love. Learning the way to love.
Once I met a hippo at a water hole. I asked him how come he was a happy soul. He said, keep on dancing, dance your blues away. Keep up your nose and wiggle your toes, dance your blues away. baby, come on, child, dance your blues away. You know today's the day. With all the love in your heart, dance your blues away. Medicine.
When every heart shall beat as one, and all mankind unite, then every land beneath the sun shall shine with truth and light. For darkness dwells in selfishness, and light in unity. And every heart shall beat as one, then one with truth will be. When in my eyes you see yourself, and I see me in yours, then we shall share the greatest wealth, whose lustrous glow endures. For love increases when it's shared, and leads to unity. Through love our hearts shall beat as one in the new humanity.
All right, with that little uplift, let's take just a 10-minute break and we'll get into other stuff and Q&As and have a lot of fun.
When the Sufis go and do the outreach, do they tell them, the individuals we see in the film, that Meher Baba's name? Do they say Meher Baba is behind all our things?
It depends on the outreach. Obviously, if it's a group of Meher Baba kids, yes. If we're doing it at a parochial school, we wait until somebody asks, and then tell them. We don't proselytize at all. We just allow a natural conversation to have, and generally not with the other groups. They know that it's White Pony Express. They know that it's called Following Francis. They don't necessarily know that it's Sufism Reoriented. Of course, there are pictures of Baba around. Gets there.
Murshid, I'd like to ask you, is Murshid on consciousness? Is it gross plane, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh? And the second part of the question, yeah, it's not hard, is like, do you guys like touch your feet and take darshan and do that kind of stuff?
Great question.
Would you repeat the question?
Yes. All right, basically the question was, what plane of consciousness, if any, is merged on? Do we guys bow down to our feet and do things like that? Excellent question. All right, some background. From the Sufi charter, Baba talked about what the qualifications of the murshids or spiritual directors would be. And he talked about the state of illumination. And he gave a description of one state called divine vision. He said, in divine vision, one is face to face with God. And with the inner eye, one sees God everywhere and in everything. This also means that to see God is to cease to see everything except God. In the next couple of paragraphs, Baba says a murshid or murshida, one whom others can follow, this is in the charter, should necessarily have divine vision, the highest state of illumination. Okay, so that's a little controversial, but it actually isn't. Baba was very explicit about it, and we found out, I did some research and I found out a video from Adi about illumination and succession. It was very interesting. This was from the first, I think, giving a little more background, in 1952, in a meeting in New York, understanding this, that the merchants have to have divine vision, have to have that level, which is usually associated with the sixth plane. But what I know, I think it's very consistent. Don Stevens, in talking about the future of Sufism, asked Baba to ensure that there was a continuous lineage of illumined merchants. And I have the actual original transcript of that. And when Don asked when Murshid does have to give up the body, can't you see it? Can't you see to it that we have an illumined Murshid? Baba replied, you don't know what you're asking. You're asking me to hold my head in my hands. It means that every minute of every day for the next 700 years, I shall have to be mindful of the Sufi hierarchy, that it has to have an illuminated Murshid. But, all right, God and I will fight it out. And I promise you that you will have an illumined Murshid for the next 700 years until I come again. 1952. 1977, Adi comes to visit. Adi Irani, who, as you know, was Baba's secretary much of the time to the West. And he's on, I just saw a video of it. He was recollecting his visits in 1952. He said this, and I almost want to say it in Adi's accent, but this is a full transcript, so the grammar is not as the Americans might write it. He said, then in Scarsdale, many things were discussed about this. I remember exactly you had expressed yourself that you did not want yourself to be called Murshida at all, Murshid Deuce. But Baba said, no, for the matter of the organization, I want you to call yourself the Murshida and take 100% interest and run the show under my aegis in the shelter of my name and my blessings. And many things discussed. And it was also decided that the charter was to be prepared and giving you the authority to take up the entire organization under your hand, under the shelter of Meher Baba. When Meher Baba returned to India, the copy of the charter was sent to you, and then the rules and regulations were seconded by Baba. In short, Baba has taken 100% interest in this, and I find whatever is going on presently in Sufism Reoriented is nothing but the continuation of Meher Baba's wish. And he says this, Baba said that he shall see that after the lifetime of Murshida, somebody takes charge of the Sufism, and as much he has to be an illumined master. And Baba did give a promise to Murshida that he shall see. Now, he does not exactly give the time or the way in which he would introduce or bring in the illumined Murshid, but the fact yet remains that in his own time and his own way, the illumined Murshid has got to come and take charge. Now that Murshida has had the great blessings of the avatar during her lifetime, which is very, very unique and very exceptional, so Murshida was absolutely guaranteed by Baba to run the Sufism Reoriented in the way that he liked it to be. But what about the future after her lifetime? Then Baba said, of course he's going to give the illumined Murshid. And we don't know if it may take some time, and there may be difficulties which all the Sufis may have to encounter. Yet Baba's blessings and all the efforts put in by Murshida all these years will answer. But this has been very exceptional, really, that the Sufi order has come directly through you, directly come in contact with the avatar. It's a great protection, and it's a great blessing. Meher Baba's blessings will always sustain you, and the new Murshid when he also comes. As is related in the charter, Baba is always there with you to help and look after you and keep the whole order very healthy. So it's really pretty consistent, both that you had to have an illumined Murshid for Sufism, which makes a great deal of sense. Now, to put it in perspective, let us not get too wow about the sixth plane. All right? Baba says just in the spiritual hierarchy, there are 102 six-planers. I mean, there may be six-planers in this group, veiled, of course. But if you're not veiled, come on up afterwards. nonetheless, it's a little rarer for someone at that stage of consciousness to be a salik, that is, to be able to operate in a personality, in what might be a somewhat provisional personality, and operate in the ordinary world and yet see at that level. So, to me it doesn't seem, in a certain sense, it doesn't seem to be a big deal because Baba set it up that way. And how can you trust really a murshid or a teacher who doesn't know your past lives? That was one of the things Murshid Adus, why she wanted to give it up, because she didn't have that kind of vision. No, Baba covered for her. But if you're giving people advice, you know what Baba said about that? You give people advice and they take it. It's your karma. So, and that's why even Baba would protect less developed spiritual teachers, because they were not capable of the wisdom or the consciousness of an individual's karma and sanskaras to be able effectively to help them. The other help for having a six-plane murshid is that, according to God Speaks, somebody on the sixth plane can, in a lifetime, bring one person, one soul up to that level of consciousness. That helps for continuity. Not that I have any idea what's going to happen in the next 700 years, but it makes sense. So, both Murshid Mackay and Murshid Khanna, when you get to know them and you hear what they have to say, all they see is God. What's so compelling about them is that it's very easy for them to love everyone unconditionally, not take them terribly seriously, because they see God and Baba everywhere and in everything. It's a little disconcerting, and, because you would hope that you could do that too. I mean, I would love to be able to see it the way they see it, and it's very compelling and very inspiring. And I'm kind of a rogue individual myself. I don't like authority generally, except avataric authority. And there have been times when I thought that the Murshids had made not a terribly good decision about something. Son of a gun, I was always wrong. And they always called it. And I was a psychologist, they're better psychologists than I am. The other thing is, all of them, including Murshid Adus, had the background, full background of Western culture, literacy, psychological knowledge, very good in terms of music, knew about food, knew all about the kinds of things that and were very good organizationally that would enable them to run an organization like this. Now, obviously, your second part of the question, there's obviously great respect and love for the teacher if in that stage of Sufism you feel connected with them. But nobody bows down to them. They wouldn't allow that. In fact, even in India, when the I guess you call them gopis of Upasani Maharaj wanted to bow down to her, she refused, and she would bow down. She would only bow down to the love they had for Meher Baba, and she doesn't see herself as any different in that sense with anyone else. She sees it's all Baba, it's all one. Yet you're able to. The nice thing about both of them is they could go to a party, they could go to a social occasion, they could meet people, and you wouldn't know. And they're not about to show you. One of the manifestations, they're comfortable with almost everyone and everything. I would write letters to Murshid Mackay about great existential distress. right? I would get no response, none. I would write to him about my dog, and he'd respond instantly. Always had a dog for that reason. Usually you don't need that much guidance because Baba has really planned it out for you. And I've rarely seen them intervene except in very tricky situations where the person might have gotten great learning, but at a huge price, an unnecessary price. So the thought that, I know there's been some thought or commentary about the merchants being intermediaries or substitutions for Baba. It's crazy. But you can see how that could happen. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a hilarious fuss. Now it's hilarious, then it was serious, with India, where a couple of the Bandli, Erich and Mani, appeared to be extremely disturbed with the advent of Dr. Mackay. This is before he became Murshida. He was an unusual person, there's no question of that. And from the Baba community, he came from nowhere. Nowhere. Didn't come from a Baba group. He just showed up, knowing that Baba was the avatar and wanting to help Murshida Deuce. Well, it was very interesting. We just came across a journal by Fred Frey. And Fred Frey was an interior decorator, a very famous one, who went to the 3 incredible weeks of Baba. And this is very interesting, 1954. So he wrote in his journal, he was very happy, I am up in the clouds, etc. And he also said that he told Mayor Baba he was concerned about Murshida Deuce's health and its impact on her work. Quotes, Mayor Baba told me not to worry, that he, Baba, had arranged for Murshida to receive very special help. Work had been in process for many years to prepare someone who would come to help Murshida at the right time, end quotes. Baba stated that he was a younger man and that he would appear when he was needed. I asked if Murshida would recognize him immediately. Baba said no. At first, he will seem a puzzle to her. She will be somewhat bewildered by his appearance, something to do with his clothes. And in fact, when Dr. Mackay then came, he's a very distinguished psychologist, journal editor, teacher of psychiatry, University of Maryland, he came to Murshida. He was kind of in rags, kind of a jean jacket and rags. And after that, he'd only wear white and he would wear ballet slippers. That was unusual. And he said, Mayor Baba told him to come there and help in any way he could. She vetted him like crazy. I remember I interviewed him. He came to one of my classes. It was humiliating later that I was teaching. And so it took about 2 years. And what Murshida really wanted to know about Murshida Deuce was sanskaras. She really wanted to know all about it. And she said, if Mayor Baba sent you here, you tell me about that. And he did. And eventually, but this was it was all unusual enough. And then I think many of the Sufis and others were very attracted to his energy at that time. And stuff got back to India. And it was brilliantly orchestrated by Mayor Baba. Brilliantly. Misinformation came that was perfect. And worked into what was an important warning from Baba, I think in 1968 or so, about beware of false masters and saints and things. That was very important. Because previously, And I was around for this. There had been a lot of problems in India. Indians, as you might expect, love gurus, saints. They love to get blessings. And Baba, knowing that he was going to drop the body soon, wanted to get the message out that they could stick with him. So that went on, and then information got to India about wild things that were going on with this guy who just showed up. And it was perfectly orchestrated because some ex-Sufis and others saw things and interpreted them slightly differently than they were. Here's my favorite. One of the things is they're leaving Meher Baba and now they're worshiping this Dr. Mackay. And some of these people went by a Sufi center at that time. They went into the hall, and guess what? There were no pictures of Baba left. None. They immediately wrote to India and said, now, I told you they're getting rid of Meher Baba. Their perception of no pictures on the wall was exactly correct. We were painting the building. Then, and I have Chris's permission to tell this story, another proof that the Sufis were leaving Meher Baba was that they were all sending their portraits of Meher Baba away, especially the portraits of Linat they had. That was also true. But there was a backstory. The backstory was that a lot of the Sufis early on recognized Lin's brilliance and picked up a lot of his paintings for almost nothing. And there came a time when Lin was not doing very well financially. And Murshid told the Sufis, look, if you've got a lot of these, if you can part with them, send it back to Lin. And Chris told me earlier that it turned out to be very helpful. Well, but the Mandalay just heard the other part of it, and it got wild and stuff. So Erich wrote a letter, and later he said he didn't know why he did it, but he wrote a powerful letter that basically said, stay away from the Sufis, and something's going on here, and there's a possible false master around. Now, it was perfect because neither Erich nor Mani really knew much about the charter. Only Adi and Meherji really knew about it. So they were able to do that, and it had a potent effect. I was very distressed at the time. These are my buddies in India. They don't, they didn't trust. I wrote them, I told them, look, it's not what's happening. But it was very effective, and a lot of the Baba groups stayed away from the Sufis for several years. It was planned perfectly. Now, I can speculate, and I won't unless you push me, about why that happened and how positive it was. But it's an illustration. Meher Baba was in control of the whole thing. I mean, it wasn't mistakes on the part of the Mandalay. They did exactly the right thing. And we were kind of surprised when, I know, Mircea Deuce wanted to answer back at one sense at one time, but after Mircea Mackay had been appointed Mircea, that kind of stopped. Meher Baba actually forbade all the Sufi merchants never to defend themselves. And strangely, Mircea Mackay said, those of you who are who think the Mandalay are doing the wrong thing, you're wrong. They're doing exactly what Baba wanted. And you should thank them and pray for them that they keep it up. Now, several years went by, and the American Baba groups, vigorous, I mean, they really they really got tough, you know. They were terrified too. There was then the thought that these merchants had hypnotic occult powers that had hundreds of people hypnotized and under their power, which was really hilarious. For example, and then it broke. We knew it was going to break. Adi Arani came to the U.S. and we had a fabulous time with him and Murshid Jim. And I could read you something that he said about that. But they were great buddies. And importantly, you know, everybody would ask Erich about this. Why did you say what you said about these Sufis? He says, I don't know why I said it. People often ask me why I say things and they come to pass. I honestly don't know why. At that time, I blurred out what was on my mind. It must be Baba. Besides this, I do not have anything else to say for the matter. I was urged to do it. So, finally, in about, things started to get totally transformed around the late 70s. And Murshid Mackay went to visit Mehrabad in 1987. And Victor Seckler, some of you know, a long time ago from the Chicago group, is very active in video. He said this, in the spring of 1987, I accompanied Murshid James Mackay and a handful of companions to India. When we arrived at Mehrabad, I witnessed and clearly heard the following exchange between Erich and Murshid Mackay, as I was only a foot or two away. I might have had a word or two wrong since it's 30 years later, but my memory of it and the gist of it is very clear. Erich greeted Murshid Mackay, hugging him warmly, as only Erich could, saying, Jimmy, you know I always loved you. I've always loved you. I had to send that letter. Mayor Baba made me do it. That was the warning letter. And Murshid Mackay assured Erich that Erich had done exactly what Baba had wished. Since Erich is an important figure to some people as still having his old position, I have a couple of letters from 1999. One of them was just, it ends, Victor, it was to Victor, please thank dear Murshid Mackay on behalf for his role in creating this series about Mani. There's a video of Mani's life. Please send our love from all Mehrabad men and women Mandli to our dear friends in the Sufi family. And then, I think more significantly, in August of 1999, Erich writes, and the appellation is, Our Dear Murshid Jim Mackay, Jai Meher Baba. How may we, the Mandali at Mehrabad, thank you and all those concerned for the lovely 5-part videos remembering Mani. What perfect timing for you to send them now. It's been a real pleasure for us all to see her shining countenance on the screen. Once again, our thanks to you, dear Jim, and to all those hands and hearts who worked together to bring about these videos, remembering Mani. May beloved Avatar Meher Baba's love blessings be on you and our dear Sufi family. Around the same time, I get a call from Jel Wolkin, who had the temerity in those days to ask Charmian Knowles, Murshid's daughter, who met Baba, to talk at the LA group. Things were still a little dicey. And Mani wrote back and said, what are you talking about? It was okay. Of course it's okay. Any of the Sufis are okay. And Mani then sent a letter, I won't read it to you, but established that, there was no issue at all with the Sufis or the Murshids. So that that fuss was correct in a certain sense. It was Baba's plan. Now, my orientation here, this is my personal belief, is that Baba is in control of things. And the only thing, and this is selfish on my part, that irritated me about that fuss was the implication that Baba was not competent, that he screwed up with Sufism Reoriented. He screwed up with me. Hey, why did he save me? And the nerve to have the Sufis have the rights to God speaks in perpetuity. The nerve not to cut this off and to have the Indians be so warm and welcoming to both Murshids that they wanted them to help dedicate this Meher Baba Universal Center. There was all kinds of things. And that he would betray hundreds of Baba lovers under false masters. That to me implied that you didn't have the avatar, you had almost an avatar. Okay? But that's selfish of me, that is not cosmic. Okay? Nonetheless, the whole thing was brilliant, lovely executed. And you know what? I don't know. This may be the time for harmony. It may be still necessary for opposition. Meher Baba loved opposition. If there wasn't any, he would cook it up. In Bangalore, the Mandali couldn't cook up enough opposition when they were starting the center. He had to go. He had to tell them and write nasty things about himself. Furthermore, one of the terrible critics of him over years and years and years would publish Lieutenant Colonel M.S. Irani, Lieutenant Colonel, battling Baba all the time. Ends up as one of the names on Baba's memorial tower in Mehrabad. Baba said, hey, he's thinking about me all the time. He's doing my work. And Sufism has encountered a lot of opposition. We had a lot. It took us 7 years to get the center built. So I don't know. I mean, all the people I know in the Baba world are totally, basically lovable and likable. And it may be that some of them are uncomfortable and continue to be uncomfortable, and that's fine. I'm sure Baba wants them to do it. If he wants to turn the key, he can. There was another really funny example that was a little more recent. This one was on Murshid Connor when a person, he or she, came to the Sufi Center in Washington. And there was a film, a very lovely film of Meher Baba. And after the film was over, the fellow said, or the girl said, he saw Murshid Connor flutter her eyes, and suddenly all of the Sufis became silent and closed their eyes and were hypnotized. It's the proof. He left afterwards. Now, if you've ever been at a meditation or a sacred event or been moved by something or been in the samadhi, you might want to remain silent for a while to kind of absorb that, which of course happened. But again, the same kind of the accurate depiction of an event can be interpreted in very, very many ways. And we have lots of hilarious examples. Now, fairness. In the history of members of Sufism Reoriented, we've had people go off the rails a little bit. And some of them, particularly in the early days, were not exactly well-versed in Sufism and would say things that were probably not illustrative. The other thing that's important to know is that, at least from my personal observation, there's nothing special really about the individuals who are members of the Sufi group versus any others. Personalities can be as varied. It doesn't denote any special spiritual advancement. One could even argue that the most needy Baba lovers spiritually end up in Sufism as much as those who could benefit from more. It's really both karmic and really up to Baba. So be assured, there's no bowing, there's no artifice, there's no intermediary, there's no deviation from Meher Baba. Angela, our moderator.
Ben is a
Sorry to make that a long answer, but it covers a lot of questions, right?
Hey, Alan J. Baba. My name is Ben Hay.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I have to split in a little bit, so I can't. I'll try to make it brief in whatever way I can, but several things to touch on here, and I might have a different take than many, but I won't go into the details and try to dissect what you said, even though a lot of what you said was factually incorrect. I think there'll be other people to do that. I'm not, and I mean this in the most heartfelt way, I was born into a Baba family. And I have always admired much of Sufism Reoriented for its ability to do things. I think the indirect path has that capability to get things done. When it's not actually a democracy and you don't have much freedom, you can actually get a lot of stuff done. And in ways that we, in the direct path, have not necessarily been able to do. I wish we did have a school here in Myrtle Beach. I wish that there were younger Baba lovers. Many of these people's kids were more involved, more participating, and knew more about Meher Baba. There's a lot to be said for an educational component. The direct path comes with a lot of responsibility, with the freedom to love and remember Meher Baba however which way you want to. That being said, though, I don't put it like this. Some years ago, I was in India, and I was invited in, me and my wife were invited in to a Sufi meeting that was Murshid Connor, Carol Connor was going on, and it was sort of in the middle of it. And I've always found, I know many of these people, they're lovely, personally people, very nice, very gracious, very appropriate, all that. But not one single person turned to look at us. We made a ruckus when we came in. Not one single person turned and looked at us when we came into that room. No one broke eye contact with Murshid Connor. And that's very disconcerting, because Baba focused, he paid a lot of attention to what is natural. None of these people were natural. Carol's not natural. She don't have an ounce of naturalness in her, from the dress to the clothing to everything. I felt sorry for a lot of these people, even though I know, like the military, the indirect path provides structure and discipline for them. And that's not a bad thing. It can help these people. But I also felt concerned because I know the history of a lot of the Sufis. Many of them had come to the center early on and had come in different ways and were perceived as being too weak. So they were sent to Sufism. And because of that weakness, that's very disconcerting when you combine it with financial resources and organization. And we've seen a history of that. We've seen Sufism under different leadership. Let me just finish what I'm saying, Angela. This is important. I'm gonna put this down on the record. It's important. distort, disrupt, try to take over, try to subvert Baba organizations. Baba made it very clear, okay? Much to your take on things, Allan. Baba made it very clear. You know it. You know it. And most of the people in this room also know it. So, that's cool. Sufism is all right. It plays a role. But given your current state of affairs, given the Sufis' current quagmire that they're in, the lack of young people to take over, the overstretch of resources, the lack of vision, much like the fall of the Soviet Empire, people didn't know quite how to reach out and ask for help. So, I formally asked the Sufis, if they need help, I'm here for them. If they need help reoriented to disoriented, there are Baba people who can help them. Okay?
Is there a question?
Huh?
Is there a question?
No, there's no question. But, I'm glad you laughed, it's funny. But it's in all sincerity, because when that transition happens, I wonder how that's going to be done. And would it be advantageous for you to move beyond some of the things that are keeping Sufism Reoriented back, keeping its full potential back? And I don't mean, again, I mean this with all the love in my heart. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben. I take your feelings sincerely. I think it's not terribly representative of what my understanding is, my experiences. I do want to, I'm glad you brought this thing about subverting other organizations. I like, and people there has been some concern about, well, Sufism wants to take over things. No. Sufism has a particular role that Baba wanted to play. It is not the same role, certainly, as the Meher Center. It is not the same role as local Meher Baba groups. It is not the same role as the Baba Center in Australia. If our resources are overstretched, well, Baba has to move in and help. I think that in characterization of the Sufis as being weak might not exactly match most people's experience. But if Baba wants you to say that, you can. And any assistance in any of our service projects would of course be welcome. So, but that's you get a feel for that nice, that sincere kind of opposition. And it's up to Baba to sort it out, really. Angela?
Anyone else?
Oh, question. I was going to back up something that he had said, since you were accused of not telling the truth about many things. My husband and I were with Murshid Jim before, and he is the one that introduced us to Bear Baba. We came here to this community. He sent us to India in the middle of the craziest controversy. We couldn't imagine how anyone could not have been with Murshid Jim, it was before he was Murshid, and not love Meher Baba. We got there confused. I got there with, so I won't name who it was, but the person that said all the paintings had been taken down and they were no longer worshiping. Well, we had just come from the center. I raised my hand in Mandalay Hall and said, that's not true. We just seen all the paintings. And the person screamed me down, literally screamed me down. I walked out and I said, one of us is crazy. I mean, that was the feeling I had. My husband and I went to Erich, And he spent 2 full days with us. And I said, what is this about with Jim? And Eric said, I don't know. He said, I love Jim. He said, Baba's making me do this. So I just wanted to add that we experienced that same thing when we were there in India.
Well, again, Mayor Baba, if you look at the big picture, Mayor Baba, if you have problems with his handling of Sufism Reoriented, you can. That's no problem. I mean, it's a learning experience on everybody's part. From my point of view, Baba is the complete avatar. He's got the plan, he's executing the plan. Yeah, we don't do it perfectly. Baba groups don't do it perfectly. We certainly don't live life perfectly. But he tells us how to do it. He tells us how to love others. He tells us how to love God. There is no indirect path if Baba is one. That's silly. That's dualistic. Well, there's Baba, and then there's the rest of the universe, which is indirect, right? No. Any love for God that is stimulated by anything in the world is direct. If you love your dog, that love goes direct to Baba. If you've like Freeman, if you hung out with Bauji, who, by the way, loves Mirshda Connor, loved her, and confirmed her spiritual status. If you hang out, you learn a lot. Bauji was not an intermediary to Baba. But boy, if he said something, you listened. And there are other people in our lives who are Baba people who are going to listen. Baba is in everything, and his love pervades everything, and one can be stimulated by a love for everything. There's nothing indirect. That means that's not Baba. Baba is one. So it is artificial, at least from my point of view, it's an artificial separation between the direct path and the indirect. I think I have some direct creds here. This is the last book I think that Baba ever approved. Massive Consciousness, it's the direct path. Everything is oriented towards Mayor Baba. It was interesting, when I was in New York, I think at Angela's house, and I'd given a talk, and I had mentioned Sufism, and this woman came up to me. Her name was Allah Sherman. Allah is a great character. She's passed on. She survived the Russian communist. She was a Gurdjieffian. She came up to me and blasted me. She said, Cohen, what is this? What is this Sufism thing? What is this intermediary? What? God is not good enough for you? The avatar is not good enough for you? You have to have a Mirshda? She was tough, Allah. I said, Allah? I said, suppose you met somebody that you knew loved Baba more than you did, and knew Baba better than you did, and whose entire work in life was to help you and other people love and remember Baba more, and that she unconditionally loved you, and that you found her to be that better Baba lover, and she volunteered to assist you for all your life, and she'd do it free of charge. What would you say? She said, then can I come to Washington? So that's, it's, hey, if somebody wants to assist in that way, it's okay. So it really isn't, it's not direct or indirect, it's all him. And that is not to say that if you look at the history of Babadom, man, it's a tough gig. Baba lovers are tough. They have opinions. They know the right way to do things, right? They can be wild. I mean, the Sufi thing is minor compared to what I call the Great Civil War of Myrtle Beach in the old days. And then even before that, there's a lot of fusses. But there's nothing that can't be overcome by love. And the interesting thing is that even in the old days, there was never a time, no matter what group, and then there was the Harry Kenmore group in New York that was controversial. None of I've never experienced either any of the Mandalay or any of the Murshids not being totally respectful of anyone who sincerely loved Baba, no matter what side they were on, right? No matter what orientation they had, no matter who brought them. There was big controversy in Israel, right? There was a woman who was considered occult or teaching psychic stuff, but happened to discover that Meher Baba was God. Took the group to India. All right? But the Orthodox people might say, oh, I don't know about that. There are now groups in China and Korea. And they have a different cultural context for Baba, which we might not understand. But they love him and accept him. And it's wonderful to see. We have in this new, Angela does make a mark when she passes by. We do have an opportunity, I think, in this kind of new age and working towards new humanity to work these things out. It may be necessary still in the future to have challenges, but it doesn't have to get in the way of loving each other and of loving God.
Allan, it's my understanding that one of the things in the charter, which is required of Sufis, is that they be absolutely honest. Am I correct in that?
Since it is impossible for anybody to be absolutely honest, Baba said you have to promise to try to be absolutely
All right,
honest.
that's good enough. Then I have just one question in the spirit of what's going on in the world today. In your talk today, to the best of your knowledge, is everything you've said and every answer you've given and every word you've said as honest as is it honest in your view?
To the best of my knowledge,
Thank you.
Congressman.
Let the record reflect it, ladies and gentlemen.
Let the documents reflect the same.
on your book.
Oh, that's right. This is,
Good enough.
Could you
Fair share.
address I don't want to qualify it, but personally I thought it was kind of silly, rumor that the Sufis are here to take over the Meher Spiritual Center.
to repeat it, was there's rumor that the Sufis are here to take over the Meher Spiritual Center. Impossible!
There you go.
Number one, Meher Baba laid out guidelines. Buzz is the expert on this. That Sufism Reoriented had to be independent of the Meher Center, even though the Meher Center would be supportive, and certainly Sufism would be supportive of the center. Totally, totally impossible, both according to the Sufi charter and according to all the correspondence that Baba has had. And I don't even know what taking over would mean. Poor Buzz has enough to worry about, right? Yes.
I don't know who to go first.
This was a question from someone who couldn't be here.
Uh-huh.
A question from someone who couldn't be here. And They wanted to know, how do you see unity and blending to create more harmony rather than disharmony? And what do you think the Sufi vision is of that?
Well, I think it's no different than Baba would wish. Unity in diversity. Unity is created by the force of love. And it is only love that can transform consciousness in a way that allows unity to be seen. The irony is it's already here. And this is a big deal. I often find myself in the weeds. But if you look at the cosmic joke, the big picture, what is the big picture? This is illusion, guys. Right? You're really God. I'm really God. We are not conscious of it. This is a dream. It ain't nothing. Baba thinks it's a joke. All right? So it is the discovery of unity rather than the creation of it. And that's why Baba said he's not here to teach but to awaken. So that's what seems to be happening. He has generated, as the last avatar in the cycle of time, a huge influx of energy, which has been seen in almost all the traditions now. You're hearing it from everyone, from the yogis, from Aurobindo, from all the different sincere spiritual programs, that new spiritual divine energy is hitting the earth in a big way. And that is awakening this consciousness of what is. So we don't have to do anything except become aware of what is and what Baba is. So I think in the big picture, that's our vision.
Allan, I'm grateful to be able to be here today and hear this at this time, because I've noticed that the center has not been able to do some of the things we wanted to. And I don't say that I'm a spokesman for the center. But we've lost programs where we had getting together with the children in Myrtle Beach, in the black communities. And we've lost opportunities that we had before that we don't have now. I'm glad to see Sufism come into town. I'm glad that Yupon Dunes is in Baba's hands again, because that was very important to us. I noticed that in New York that they had many groups at the same time, and they didn't appear to always get along, but now we're much closer together.
Yeah.
So time is the teacher to us all of what's to happen. I'm so glad to have Sufism as a neighbor here, because we need to work together. Thank you.
I think under, if I may, under Buzz's leadership and Wendy, who I knew as a little girl, still as sweet as ever, that's going to be the move. We do what we can do for Baba, and when we work together, it's synergistic. The Mary Center is going to grow into a strong and powerful force, not only in Myrtle Beach, but in the country. It's a long haul, but it's going to be real, and that there are only a few organizations or groups that Baba guaranteed would be here for 700 years. Center is one of them. Sufism is another. I kind of expect the Oklahoma Center. The Australians are doing well. I haven't seen the literature of that. But we know that that's going to happen. And when the folks from the Trust came over, they also know it's going to happen there. Sooner or later, all it's going to take, that spark is it's going to take a couple of celebrities, that's it. That's all. I hate to say it on such a secular level. A couple of celebrities become Baba lovers, and the center's going to be filled, instantly almost. I know maybe Buzz is not looking forward to exactly happening all at once, but we're going to have to deal with an explosion. Probably, in India, Baba's name and influence is growing. Well, the Indians have a certain broad ability to grab spiritual masters, in general. But that's going to be very big, and it's kind of terrifying. Any of you have been to Shirdi, it's Sai Baba's too. 500,000 people can be there in a day. I kind of hope we don't do that exactly, because here's the other thing. Mayor Baba is not here just for Mayor Baba lovers. We get pretty selfish about it. He does not distinguish. He has a path with Baba lovers, but he's responsible for the rest of the universe, for getting the Christians together, to transforming Islam, to enriching all the spiritual streams. He's not a jealous guy. Really, he's not planning that. And he's talking about the transformation of the entire earth. We lose sight of that sometimes. His job, his universal work is really universal. It's very, very big. And so we might be saved from total rush on resources. But it's going to be very interesting. As one wit said, forget the past. You'll have enough to worry about in the future.
Allan, thank you very much for putting yourself up here to share information and answer questions.
It's
To
okay.
turn this up. Thank you again. I have a divergent question.
Sure.
It has two parts. The first is how can the general public connect with Sufism Reoriented in both of its centers for things like classes and stuff like that? That's part one. And part two is variously that I'm aware of here in Myrtle Beach and in some other towns, there are discourses meetings
Yes.
open to the public, but really not promoted or announced to the general public, even though, if somebody wandered in, it would be fine. Is Sufism doing anything like that, or has a plan to do anything like that, or has a model to do anything like that? So that's part two. That would be helpful information for those who are doing it already or want to do it elsewhere.
Let's see. I think there's a couple of responses to that. One, from the point of view of resources like videos, books, you're going to see much more available in the coming years. I'd say in 3 to 5 years you're going to see very interesting books summarizing some of Murshid Mackay's analyses of sanskaras and explanations, which you'll really like. As I said, we're also working on the Upasani Maharaj. In California, the center has been opened up to the general public on several occasions. In terms of like discourse groups, I think if there are places that the Baba activity in the Bay Area is pretty strong, and the Baba activity here is pretty strong. Washington, not so much. Pam left, I mean, what can we do here? So the answer is generally yes. We can expect probably more public events. Right now, they're mostly done through music. So many of the general public has been exposed to Mayor Baba songs that they really like. And when they inquire, they find out, well, what's that based on? Sounds good to us. So I think probably the major, I'm just guessing, the major distribution to the public will be somehow through the arts, through drama, through music, etc. And if there's a need for example, assistance with groups who might be doing discourse meetings, etc. That'll be encouraged. I mean, for example, I know Sufism made available their whole facility for the Meher Baba Trust presentation. It wasn't taken advantage of, but the invitation was there.
I didn't know I would have something. What I wanted to ask is, we're all dying. Okay, I know, but everybody knows that. You lose your friends all the time, right? I've been in this since '68, so you're losing your friends. And you remember there's that wellspring? Remember that wellspring? Can you anticipate any wellsprings going to go on with the young people? Because a lot of the kids that I took care of, I don't even know if they're. It's this wellspring. That's what we want to see. So wellspring.
We want to see this.
Of the young people.
Yeah, Baba, over the last 50 years or so, there's been generational changes where certain generations seem to click, demographically. Although, 50% of all the Baba lovers, I think, is my guess, you never see a group and you don't know. But looking at demographics, it's probably we're going to see a lot more interest in young people. It'll be different from us aging hippies, recollecting our past. It'll have it. A lot of it's going to have to do, I think, with if you look at the millennials, the whole issue of meaning in life. That's the grabber. Everybody wants to know what the purpose of life is, eventually. And it's getting a little bit later now for the young people. Their adolescence has been stretched out in general, so that the dissatisfaction with money or with power or prestige, etc., is taken a little bit longer to wear out. But, Baba's got this in hand. I mean, it's his problem. And we see a lot more activity, particularly the teenagers who are just incredible. Because remember, we got to die off to get back in. And there is a Meher Baba labor shortage out there. And have you noticed that the average mortality of Meher Baba people is gone way up? We have to stay in bodies longer than we want to, really, because this is the generation that really can get it, that knows how to get it done. So that's the thing. You have to live longer, but as soon as we go, we're gonna pop in that new generation. There is a lottery out there in the astral world. There's a lottery to get in for these Baba families. Holy mackerel. Push for procreation or adoption, heavy duty.
I hate to bring up the subject of time, but it is 10 minutes to 6. It is getting late. We can hang out with Allan forever. He's very, very entertaining and a wonderful speaker and very cogent. If there are any burning questions, please raise your hand.
Well, I'm really a newbie to all of this, not to Baba, but the idea of having an intermediary. I have a really hard time with that. And do you believe that she's illuminated and that you follow her advice on everything? I mean, I don't know, but that part, I feel like I'm direct with Baba, so that is a major question for me. Anyway, like I said, I'm new to Sufism Reoriented, and that's the one that keeps sticking there for me.
Well, if you think of it that way, of course it would be sticky, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's very sticky.
But if in fact Baba set it up the way he did, and if in fact you have an illuminated teacher and you're attracted to that path, they do their best to push you closer and more directly to Baba. There's no intermediary there. Now, can you push to get some advice? Sometimes they'll give you advice. It's mainly the inspiration, the teaching, and the constant knowledge that somebody that you trust really sees who you really are. And I consider it inspirational in that sense. Absolutely not necessary, but inspirational help. And somebody who does good things, you know. It's not a big deal. It's comfortable.
It just reminds me of like the Catholic Church, because you have to go through the Pope and it's a difficulty for me.
It's because of past lives you've had in the church. I don't blame you, or any of us. Of course, there's an instinct against organized religion. Baba talks about it. And it's natural to feel skittish about that. This is a special circumstance. It ain't like that. And if you want to be around lovers of Meher Baba, okay, it's to remember. And the better and the more committed those lovers are, from the Mandalay or people who you think are totally dedicated, the closer you are to them, sometimes it's helpful. It's a reminder. It's not necessary.
That's why I come to the center, though.
Yes.
Or India.
Well, I mean, here's what is the lagoon cabin an intermediary? Come on, right? Come on. No, it isn't.
If you would like to continue your conversation, perhaps we can do that offline. I'm so sorry to cut off the fantastic dialogue. If there's any more burning questions, we can take a very short one. Very short, and that's it.
Yeah, we have to burn out.
But if Allan is willing, perhaps you could take the conversation to one side. We have another group that meets in the back corner that has reserved the time, unfortunately.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, look, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Allan.
Jai Baba.
Very
Jai Baba.